Welcome to The New You, a podcast produced and operated by the Gainesville Community Counseling Center. We are here today with Chanae Jackson. Chanae Jackson, do you know what we do here?
At the Gainesville Community Counseling Center?
Yeah.
I'm going to take a guess and say you do counseling.
You are so on target.
And you focus on people who typically don't have access to counseling.
We do. We are a nonprofit mental health center that welcomes anybody and everybody. We offer sliding scale fees down to $50, and if that's too much, we get scholarship funding for you, and that's where your organization comes in too. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about how you can get in touch with us. If you are looking for some counseling services, you can reach us at 352-448-9120 or on the interwebs at www.GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com. www.GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com.
WKRP in Cincinnati.
I love that show, don't you? That's one of the flying turkeys.
That's all I hear.
The flying turkeys, right yeah. So at our center, we focus on a variety of issues, and so we offer mindfulness, we offer individual, couples, family therapy, and we even have a mobile mental health unit that'll come out into the neighborhoods and provide services out there. So on our podcast, what can you expect? A whole lot of nothing. Just kidding. We're going to offer tips on mindfulness, offer tips on how to maintain your mental health, any hot topics, relationship tips, and sex advice.
I like it.
You like sex?
Yes.
Oh, thank God somebody likes sex. I wish my wife did, but anyway. Today's topic is a topic for the month, and this month is BIPOC Mental Health Awareness Month. Did you know that?
I did actually.
Did you? I saw it because my daughter sent it to me. Very good, Lexi. So we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges specific to people of color related to mental health, whether it's access, funding, stigma, or anything else that comes to mind. So I want to introduce Chanae Jackson. And Chanae Jackson has a variety of hats that she wears in this community, all of which I love and adore. But today, she is going to introduce a little bit about one of the 5,000 organizations you work with that focuses on mental health. So Chanae, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Absolutely. So am I introducing my organization?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about healing, what's it called?
Healing for All.
Healing for All.
So I am Chanae Jackson. I don't like to do introductions, but I guess it comes with the territory.
Yes, ma'am.
A few of the organizations that I work with that focus on mental health services, one is I'm a board member of Healing for All, and the way that Healing for All is structured is we actually gave scholarships. So we vet counselors that are qualified, and not just qualified when it comes to education, but also when it comes to culturally competencies and ensuring that we are inclusive with respect to people's, culture and differences. In addition to that, people that are typically can't access services either because they don't have any money at all or underfunded. We believe that people should have more options than just what they are able to get due to Medicaid or with service providers. And being able to give people choice, we think, helps to empower them as they're looking and seeking out the mental health services and gives them options and opportunities.
So how did Healing for All come about?
So Kelly Berryhill is the person that actually founded Healing for All. I used to actually work with her husband over at SunTrust. And so as she's talking to her husband about what she wants to do and the reason that she wants to do it, he was like, oh, you should connect with Chanae. Ironically, Kelly and Tyra Edwards, who goes by Ty Loud, they'd known each other when they worked at Meridian together.
Oh, okay.
And so Kelly was unaware that Ty and I were very interconnected with a lot of the advocacy. So it was something that came together very organically.
Yeah, neat. And so it's a nonprofit.
Yeah, it's it's a nonprofit, but then also Black Parent Support Network is a nonprofit that I helped to co-found. And then one of our emphasis is actually on mental health services, primarily for teens and youth, but then also for families as well.
And so what are some ways that like an organization like Gainesville Community Counseling Center could tap into
working together as it relates to teachings, education, advocacy, also offering those services. Our services are very surface level, so like we teach students how to be mental health first, offer mental health first aid, which helps to empower students in order to be able to see the signs and advocate amongst their peers, but then also we're able to do the same thing with families. Many of our our events that we actually have always have a healing component. Helping people to understand that there doesn't have to be a stigma related to mental health services, and mental health should be something we're addressing in every facet of life. So I don't care if you're in a math class, there's opportunities in order to be able to take care of your mental health, and then understanding that we should not wear resilience as a badge of honor. So it is something that we should be employed after we've exhausted all other options and opportunities in order to be able to heal and move forward.
So talk to me a little bit about that piece of resilience as a badge of honor.
And then we're just taught that. So as a child that's raised in a Black community, there is a stigma. If you require mental health services, it must be something that's of the devil. It is that you're weak and you're weak-minded if you allow things to actually get you down. And so you're taught, you suck it up and you keep moving. And so being a strong, especially a strong Black woman, but a strong Black man is what you have to be. And if you're not, then that means there's something that's wrong with you.
Right.
And so therefore, no matter what it is, we don't often go and get services in the very beginning, but we can actually help to resolve issues or trauma that we're having because we're too busy letting things get so far gone because we're trying to have that badge of resilience. And then it crosses over into our actual physical health.
Yeah. It's interesting because in the predominantly white community, we see resilience as a good thing, right? And it is a good thing. But for the African American community in particular and other BIPOC communities, it has a negative connotation. And
it's negative because with resilience, they expect for us to be okay with racism. They expect us to be okay without having adequate housing. We're supposed to be okay with not having food. And so resilience looks different because we have all of these systemic issues, and we're supposed to be okay with the systemic issues and not that the system has caused oppression and the things that are going on, that it must be back to that stigma that there's something wrong with us.
Right.
So even though the deck is stacked, we should be okay with the deck being stacked, and we should be able to overcome that. And so that's the manner in which you look at resilience. And if you don't, then that means there's something that you've not done properly. There are wrong decisions that you made. And often that's just not the case.
Right. So beyond, stigma of accessing mental health, what do you notice are some of the other obstacles or barriers for the African American community?
The manner in which it is done, access is a huge issue for people who want to be able to access it. So typically, if you are employed and have insurance, often you're underinsured. And so either you might have mental health services, but then there is a copay that you can't afford. If you're a person that receives state assistance or Medicaid and things like that, then you're very limited to where you can go. And in some places you go for mental health services, they're overloaded because the caseloads are so high. It's very institutionalized. And so that is something that also can be triggering, is the places that you're forced to go in order to be able to access mental health services. Right. Additionally, quite often in some places, because we are people who don't have the means in order to get adequate health services, you're dealing with people that may not even be counselors. They're still in training. They're very, very new. And then the people that actually oversee that part, which is great as it relates to training, but because their caseload and their plate is so full as well, they're not able to give the adequate trainings and supports that people need to be. Additionally, there's not enough providers that represent the BIPOC community. Yeah. So culture is huge, and culture plays a major point in how successful mental health services can actually be. And so sometimes, not that anyone even isn't aware of an implicit bias, it's just sometimes you don't understand the differences in culture. Right. And so there's that puzzle piece that's missing as well. Yeah. And then often too, we want to build a level of trust, and we're not able to do that quite often because we're dealing with people that don't look like us. Right. And so it's those things. So of course, and I know me personally, with friends and family, people I've encountered, even when you go, when they're looking at a person that does not look like them, they automatically state what they still don't understand. So even when that counselor may be giving the best advice for them, often it's taken with a grain of salt.
So with regard to the cultural competency, what are some things that you look for that say to you somebody does have a level of cultural competency related to the African American community in particular? It's
basically on a case-by-case manner in which you can actually look at it. So for example, in the Black community, we often talk to our children very, very direct. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we understand. So we understand that if I tell my son to sit your ass down, it's not that I'm abusing him
Right.
or give him a hard time. And when I'm nice, that's not a language he understands. And it's just we take in information differently. And then we process things and we look at the world in a very different manner. So helping them to know and understand that. Also with cultural competencies, often I'm realizing when we look at relationships, the manner in which we look at relationships in the Black community is very different than we look at relationships in the white community. Often with things like white feminism, they look at chivalry as can be a negative thing. Black women want to be protected and taken care of. So even as we are feminists, we would still believe in cooking for our mate and those things, and we don't think that those are menial tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going to a counselor who's stating that your mate is demeaning you because they look at you to cook and clean and those particular things, we don't see those things in that manner. Often with some of the cultural competency from feedback that I've gotten from other people, white counselors are afraid to dig deep. And so once they start to really get to things that are triggers and really get to the root of it, it's their counselor who's afraid to actually go and take it further. And so they don't feel, or even too sometimes as they are conveying their emotions and their thoughts, they feel reduced as if that, because the counselor doesn't understand, as if they're overthinking things.
Right.
And so we need to understand that perception absolutely is reality. And so understanding that while you might not live a particular lived experience, you can't minimize a person's lived experience, especially when they have taken that leap in order to seek out help and services.
Absolutely. Well, and you said this before, in our community, there's almost an absence of people of color who are providing mental health services.
Absolutely.
I mean, I could probably count on one hand the number of people that are out there. And I'm wondering, we're having this push to get more African Americans and more people of color in colleges and universities. How could we go about encouraging them to continue on into the mental health field?
Well, part of the issue is pay. If I gotta go pay $120,000 for a degree, I want to make more than $40,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not on you, that's on the system and the manner in which it looks at mental health services and the adequacy and pay. Me being a person with a psychology degree, the reason I didn't go any further is I realized even with a doctoral degree, I would barely be making ends meet in order to be able to take care of my family. Additionally, because pay is a parameter or a factor, when you go to even a lot of the large entities like Shands and school board, where there could be a great deal of value, they don't pay any money for people to be able to sustain and take care of their children.
Right.
And I understand that part of that is because of the mental health system in the manner in which it's structured. I know some of it has to do with funding, some of it has to do with, legislation, but even us understanding that those are major factors and barriers to getting people to go. Because many people who go to school to become mental health counselors don't have the means to pay for college up front. So that means they're gonna come out in the red, they're gonna owe.
Right.
And so now I have the burden of student loans, and then I'm only making X amount of dollars and I have a family I need to prepare and take care of.
Yeah. By the way, I raised my prices.
Okay.
So I'm paying my people.
Okay.
So if you know people, tell them to come on. I
Absolutely.
need some people of color over here. But it's important, right? Because even as you walk into a place, it kind of gives you a sense of who's welcome here and who's not welcome
Absolutely.
here, right? And I know a lot of places that you go into, it's pristine, it's got this very high caliber, high society look in the office, and I feel uncomfortable in those offices.
Absolutely.
And then you come into my location and it's like, what the hell, why don't you clean your shit up? Right. I got an air conditioner that doesn't work on one side, it's getting fixed on Thursday.
Okay.
Anyway, part of the reason that I'm in this location is because of its accessibility to East Gainesville. And the reason that we do the mobile mental health is to reach that community and to have somebody who's a person of color in the mobile mental health unit is absolutely essential. I think just for those reasons.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can go into the mobile mental health and I get along with a lot of folks, but people are going to have a natural resistance, and so I think that's very important. So you kind of started hitting on some of the other topics, like we've got all these great resources in town, right? Like you got the mighty UF and you got the mighty Shands and you got the school board, and what do you see them doing or not doing as far as helping the African American community address issues related to mental health?
They don't. So there's no deliberateness at all.
Mm-hmm.
Even we're looking at skill sets of counselors, and I'll start with the school system. there is a skill set that is missing. There is training that is imperative that we actually have and fundamental to the actual success of counselors that the school board does not. Even when you look at their professional development, it's more of I check the box. So yes, we did professional development, but nothing about it is meaningful. Nothing about the professional development really is about pushing culturally responsive pedagogy or being culturally competent as you meet and engage with families. And oftentimes, so even people that are trying to give family services, there you'll see they document, the family didn't want services, but did you take the time to walk them through? Did you take the time to educate them? Quite often, I'm even helping with advocacy for people even at Shane's at UF. They've allowed the bureaucracy to get in the way. And the same thing, so you have social workers who, if they're called in on the weekend, they don't feel like doing that. They get there when they get there. When a person is dealing with a traumatic experience, that's a level of customer service.
Right.
That's a level of trust building that a lot of people miss that nuance.
Right.
With the University of Florida, they do a lot of research, but they take that data and that information, they monetize the research, and even sometimes they weaponize it, but they don't bring any of the research that they've actually done successfully back to the community and pour it within the community.
Right.
And those things are extremely, problematic. We look at even with law enforcement, Alachua County Sheriff's Office and GPD, they're talking about how they have these mental health responders. But then when you actually talk about the implementation of the program, you got 2 responders for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right.
So literally, it's just to say we have this program. When you're looking at the intake process, there is no value in that process because it's not been vetted, it's not research-based. It's just we threw some information together and said, this is what we want to gather.
Right.
When you ask, okay, what is your, what are the metrics that we're trying to gauge? How are you tracking this data? They're not able to answer any of those questions. So then we understand that you've not built a program where you're really trying to find and understand how to best serve people. You just want to say, I have this program and it exists. And then what happens is when people don't access these programs, we blame the people for not accessing the programs.
They're lazy, they're
right.
involved.
And not taking ownership that
Right.
and that's what equity is about. We've not given people what they need as far as resources, as far as education, as far as just even making them feel seen in order to get them to the table. And I often let people know, people want to trust you before they want to know what you can do for them.
Right.
And so we're not even willing to build the trust because we're so busy saying, well, I'm doing this and it's for you, so you take it or leave it. And that's not a way to bridge gaps that are really imperative to bridge.
Yeah. Well, especially in the counseling field, like 30% of the effectiveness is all about the relationship.
Absolutely.
And so if you don't have that relationship, it doesn't matter what the rest of you do.
Exactly. And even doing it in a way that's not always formal. So for me, we came up with a midnight basketball proposal. And that's for youth and the gun violence and things. If we understand that most people who perpetuate violence were victims of trauma first, then let's address that. And so in our midnight basketball program, some of the volunteers would actually be people from Alachua County Crisis Center. And the reason for that is if things were so to happen or kids need someone to talk to, it's very different if you say, well, go to Alachua County Crisis Center than if you say, well, go to Mr. Larry, who people have seen in the things that they naturally innately do. So because a trust and relationship has been built, that's totally set apart for mental health services. When that child needs that need met, they're going to go there first. I wanted people to understand, even with mental health, and if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, having people that are addressing those needs that are a part of the mental health services programs is what's going to be making sure that they're a great deal more successful when we start to get the self-esteem and self-actualization and those things. So when a person needs their needs met as it relates to food and security, if that person, we're going to go with Mr. Larry because you're the person that's is there at inception, that relationship is built. So when they say, hey, you should come see me in order to talk about these other needs, there's a great deal of ease that you're able to do that because you built a relationship but actually meeting those other needs before we got to that level of needs.
Yeah. Now, you've used the word trauma a couple of times, and I'd be interested to know, how do you conceptualize and define trauma as it pertains to the lived experience of African Americans, but especially today, the teens.
What's ironic is when we think of trauma, the first thing people think of is trauma within people's households, or trauma because a person lives in a quote unquote high crime neighborhood. When you actually talk to black people feel safe in our quote unquote high crime neighborhoods. We are aware that we live in neighborhoods that don't have any resources. That's trauma. We are aware of microaggressions where people innately assume that we're not intelligent. That's trauma. We deal with even advocating for your children and the school system or in your family member in healthcare and doctors and teachers and everybody telling you that you don't know what you're talking about when you absolutely do. I advocate around a lot of trauma that people experience with law enforcement interactions. People don't understand what it feels like. Like literally, when people start to engage with you, they automatically take it into a negative perspective. They innately ignore you and the things that you have to say.
So, we're talking about the different types and different forms of trauma that exist, and this notion that trauma is something specific to experiencing crime, which is trauma. Yes. It can be traumatic, but you're highlighting the fact that there are multiple forms of trauma.
And even with trauma as it relates to crime, some of the other things that cause trauma. So as I've been clear with you all, I have a family member that was killed this morning in her home. And the level of trauma they have is her mom wasn't able to go see her before she died. Right. Because she's a gunshot victim. And we understand that she's a gunshot victim. Why is it that a person can't escort the mom in there to see her child?
Right.
Trauma when it relates to that you've lost someone, and then the first thing that law enforcement doing is pointing fingers instead of trying to give us a moment, let us breathe, let us take it all in.
No
so right, or even when traumatic things happen, law enforcement doesn't think that they should come and actually talk to the family and say, hey, let me explain to you what's going on, this is what to expect. So then we're further re-traumatized. And then even after it's all resolved, no matter which way it's resolved, everybody just goes on their merry way, and no one ever comes back to say, okay, well, what are you dealing with? How are you? I use the example of the children whose birthday party got shot up. The trauma is that no one stepped up for the children after it happened. Mm-hmm. So kids learn to become very desensitized with their trauma, because it's like, okay, well, what are we being upset for? Well, the manner in which we feel it doesn't matter because no one's going to do anything.
Right.
So even the trauma that we have is not per se from the crimes itself, it's from the lack of follow-up or the lack of interventions. And that's when you talk to people, that's what they remember. Even when it comes to a crime, if a child is a victim of sexual assault or different things like that, and we see how the judicial system actually works and brings them no justice, and you have moms that are fighting for justice, and then the state attorney will go make a deal and it doesn't matter what the family says. Sure. Or just not even willing to give a parent information and still trying to advocate for your child. So a lot of times it's not even just the actual crime, it's our lack of follow-up, our lack of resources after the crime.
Yeah. Well, it gets back to that whole idea that there's no relationship, there's no nothing, that y'all should just be resilient.
Yes.
With all of this crap,
yep.
Right? And you carry that with you, and how could you not? And then you advocate for those needs, and then once again you're just shot down.
Yep.
And called an angry black woman.
Which I am.
Right. And right, but it's weaponized.
And even with me, because it was weaponized, I take full ownership of that. So even today, like I got on Facebook and I cussed everybody out. And it was like this one person, and it was like, well, you don't give her that, and too many people need you. And as people call me, I'll unlearn that. Stop telling me who needs me. What about who I need? I said, the fact that I'm often on these lives begging everybody for help. Don't go call me now and tell me how I should respond as I'm grieving. Right. Don't tell me what I should do. Tell me why you're not making the people who are refusing to come to this table. Why is it that I'm the only person that's willing to be honest enough about how angry I am? And it's those things. We should be angry. We should be mad as hell. Just not even me personally, but we're so many things.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. So you've highlighted some of the gaps that are there for the African American community: access of care, quality of care, treatment while you're there, sort of a thing. What are some other gaps that you see in this community?
Just even enough available services. There's just not enough. So even most people that have to do mental health services have to do it during the day. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a parent with no resources or no car, or you have to work, right, you don't have the ability to take off or the ability to get your child to mental health services. And those are the only times that are available. If you have a child that needs mental health services, but then also they're struggling in school, how do you weigh out, okay, well, I'm going to pull them out of school, but then they also need the lessons that they need. And so there's no balance as it relates to that. Because so many people need weekend and evening appointments, mm-hmm, then that also limits the providers that you're actually able to go to. Sure. Because there's very limited in the providers who do those particular things. And even with my own children, I've had them in counseling. There's been some great counselors. It becomes very difficult with life to try to maneuver or to navigate getting them those services because and I understand too that, mental health providers want to have a quality of life, but at the same time, because of the service that they provide, it's very difficult to mesh those sometimes, especially in communities where there are less resources.
Yeah. What are some suggestions you have for African Americans to advocate for themselves with regards to their needs for mental health?
Some suggestions that I have, which are scary. If you're going to a counselor, you give it your all for a few sessions. If you all are not connecting, if you don't feel understood, and I'm not stating that there's something against the counselor, be bold enough to be able to go and try something else.
Own it, yeah.
Don't accept it because of that level of fear. When it relates to that, I understand too, in our community, sometimes don't tell friends or family you're going to seek services. Sometimes it's our friends and our family that talk us out of it. Go do what you need to do for you mentally, and then when you feel like you're strong enough, be able to have those conversations with friends and family. Also, shop around. I understand that you're limited with providers, and even some of the best providers are on waiting lists. Even if you have to get services from somewhere else in the meantime, be willing to say, now that this provider has opened up, that I'm being able to go there. But then also advocate. When I mean advocate, it's going to take us as a group to advocate and say, these are the things that we don't have. And so we address a lot of issues as a one-off. Typically, anytime there's a disconnect, it's a systems disconnect. But because a lot of people are not speaking up and just deal with situations the way that they are, we don't have the ability to be able to change those things. And helping us to understand that even as it relates to mental health services, it is bigger than just us as an individual. It actually impacts us as an entire community. It impacts our entire family, and it also impacts our health in a very detrimental way. And so we want to have a greater level of deliberateness. Then also advocating for people that that seem to be good at this to go to school and become mental health providers, to get trained in mental health first aid.
Sure.
So work with the things that we actually do have at this time and being able to build upon those.
And I would add, don't ever feel afraid to ask for a reduced fee, even from the ones who say.
Oh, that's a great one, yes.
Right. I know you've had a long day. How do you manage your own mental health in the midst of all of this?
Activism. So literally, I'm a person that's not good with feeling helpless. So when I'm feeling helpless, I get to work. And so for me, activism is a form of rest, and it is a form of restoration, and that's for me. Sometimes I need to have a nice stiff drink. I don't like to tell people that because they haven't been into that, but sometimes that's how I relax.
Yeah.
I've also learned sometimes we're often turned off. Well, I don't think medication should be the first step. If you're to a point where you need that, it helps to even you out in order to be able to deal with your anxiety and those things so they don't actually fester. So I want people to understand that being very deliberate about taking care of me first. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
So being deliberate about self-care. So there are times that I shut down and shut my phone down. The world can explode. I'll have to find that out. And I had to learn that, because it was the only way that I could reset and actually re-energize and be able to take care of my own mental. Additionally, when it came to some conversations and friends or family and things, some things I don't have the capacity to take in.
Yeah.
And being very deliberate and then having to be unapologetic about that.
Yeah.
And not that I mean any harm. It's the only way that I can actually take care of me to be able to take care of my friends and actual family. Some people like to travel, so finding out, because it's different for everyone, what those things are, and then being deliberate about them and doing that first. A lot of times we do it the opposite. We take care of everybody else first, and then we take care of us, and realizing that we have to take care of us first in order to be able to take care of everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's very hard for people, because we're not, that's not what we're given, that's not what we're told to do. And so it's oftentimes some people don't understand that part of it, but it's the only way that you're able to wake up, and be able to face another day.
Yeah. Because if you're not filling your own tank.
Right. And then also finding people that can pour into you as well. Sometimes we're so busy being the strong person, we don't understand the importance of actually having people that when you're having a weak moment, who is it I can reach out to? It might not be a person you talk to every day, but they are that person that you can trust and confide in, even if you haven't gotten to the point of having those services. And then being honest with yourself about what it is that you need in order to take care of your mental health. Sometimes we are afraid because we feel selfish, not realizing that sometimes we have to be selfish. As it relates to taking care of our mental health needs.
Yeah. And it does feel selfish for some people, but in reality, there's nothing selfish about saying, I need this for me.
Yes.
Because what a wonderful example to set for your kids, for your neighbors, for the community, that it's okay to say, I need this for me. You do you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So as we kind of wrap this up, I'm hearing that there still is a lot of work to be done in our community.
Absolutely.
With regard to mental health, with regard to access, finances, those sorts of things. If somebody wanted to reach out to your organizations and start a process to either get in to see somebody or to get some support, how would they reach you?
Typically, they just reach out to me. So they do via Facebook, Chanae Jackson, Chanae, the accidental activist. People reach out on my website, which is ChanaeJackson.com. People text me because I'm very accessible with my phone number. And then, I've done that with you all. I'll connect you like, hey, I got a person. Or if people are, trying to close in gaps, if they've reached out and there's been that disconnect. So working very deliberately where I will, send them to you all or send them to Kelly at Healing for All. I'm very deliberate about who I send people to because I don't trust everybody, because it can further traumatize someone or even create a greater level of distress. And so even with Alachua County Crisis Center, there are some people there that I absolutely trust. And I tell people, don't minimize it just because they're offering their service for free. This is a level of quality. And so that's just kind of what I do. It's case by case because each person is an individual.
Sure.
And sometimes the bureaucracy in the process is what gets in the way. And so sometimes I help people to go around that process.
Right. So if you weren't available, they could reach out to Healing for All.
Absolutely.
Directly.
They can reach out to Healing for All directly. They can reach out to Black Parent Support Network, and I apologize to the definitive email addresses, Gainesville Community Counseling and Youth Center. And I've also referred people to you all because you are a group of people that I trust.
I appreciate that.
And there's a deliberateness about each organization and how they do things. And I think that's the deliberateness that's going to help us to move the needle forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, I don't want to keep you because I know you got a lot of stuff to do, and I appreciate you taking the time today.
Yes.
And our doors are always open.